Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes. We are continuing our preview series of SEC basketball teams for the coming year. Today we get to Texas A&M, which had one of the odder seasons we've ever seen as we followed SEC hoops. The Aggies, I thought, should have gotten in the the NCAA tournament. They definitely were in the SEC tournament and did a lot of damage, which the NCAA selection committee seemed to ignore. I thought the Aggies should have been well into the field, but were not. Instead, went to the championship game of the NIT. And you brought up a stat off podcast about the weirdness of A&M season. I'll ask you to share now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about it a lot last year. If you watched the games and kept up with the SEC, I think it was pretty clear, for a team to start as well as they did. They went 15-2 to start the season, had an 8-game winning streak in there, and then turned around and had an 8-game losing streak. So it's, we talk about just the rarity of a team winning 8 in a row and then turning around and losing 8 in a row, but that's exactly what happened with Texas A&M. So they went from 15-2 to 15-10. And then after that, what do? They have another 7-game winning streak in there all the way to the SEC championship. And win 4 more in a row in the NIT to get to the championship and lose by 1. So, yeah, I mean, it was a strange season to say the least, but I think you could tell by the end of the season that they were undoubtedly, to me, playing like one of the better teams, at large teams for sure. But, that's what we always say, Chris, is sometimes that non-conference schedule is so important, even in the SEC. And I think you look back on it, that was something that probably stood out to some people. And again, did the 8-game losing streak in there have something? I know people made that argument, but I think you can't make an entire NCAA tournament argument based on just a team having a long losing streak. So yeah, a strange season, but a season for a team that played 40 games that I think gives them a lot of momentum moving forward, just with the fact that they finished the season as strong as, you know, many teams in the country, just by winning as many games as they did from mid-February on.
This is going to be a hard team to figure for the coming year. And you have seen that as you look across the landscape of where picks have come. Blue Ribbon had A&M in the top 25. Lindy's had A&M second in the SEC. You look across the roster, though, Blake, it's not one that's super flush with star power. Henry Coleman the third, easily the best returning player and probably a top 20, 25 player in the league, if not better than that. You had some guards that got a lot of experience down the stretch. You had some transfers, Dexter Dennis, who transfers in from Wichita State. I can't remember if he was the player of the year in that league on the defensive side or not, but if not, he was close. Dennis actually played more minutes than anybody on this team did last year per game. So you said he was the
He's
defensive player of
reigning
the year.
AAC
Yeah,
defensive player of the year. Yeah.
that's what I thought. But and you've got what, 11 guys? There's 10 guys who played double-digit minutes somewhere last year. That includes Eric Pratt and JUCO. But you've only got 5 of those that played 20 or more minutes. That includes Andre Gordon, who was just barely above 20. I think this is a roster that, if A&M has the kind of year that people think it can, this is not going to be one that's built on big names like it is otherwhere, but it's going to be depth and wearing you out with the kind of style that A&M wants to play.
Well, that's what I say. It may not be a team that has a lot of star power, quote unquote, on that one, but it's still a team that's filled with Buzz Williams guys. Like, I think that's
Yeah.
the difference. It's not ever about just star power. It's about, you have the guys that fit how you want to play, and I think he's got that here. He's got a lot of guys that fit his mold and how he wants his teams to play, and I think that can be a big difference when you're kind of looking at teams, year by year, and it's not always just how many stats did this guy put up or that, but it's, do they fit into what this program wants to do? And I think you've got a lot of that on this roster, because you got a lot of guys that are coming back, 4 returning starters. And I think, as I'll say and probably mention a couple times, to me, it's just, how do you replace some of the things that Quentin Jackson brought to the table? Because we talk about
Yeah.
that strong finish to the year. I mean, he was just such a big part of that. And I think that, his scoring, his leadership, all those different things, how do they replace that? And I think that's going to be one of the bigger storylines heading into the season. for this team. They've got some guys capable of doing that as a unit, but I don't think they have necessarily one guy in particular that will be able to perhaps replace a lot of the things that he did. So I think that's one of the things with this team, and I do feel like experience is important. I think you got some experienced guys here, right? You're talking about a Dennis coming over playing 30 something minutes a game at Wichita State. I think Tyrese Radford started all 40 games for A&M last year. I keep thinking like they played 40 games last year.
Man.
He started all of them. I think Obaseki started the final 13 games of the season. Wade Taylor played a lot. Henry Coleman, of course, played a lot. Um, I think that's one of those things you think about too. Is you've got some guys here, and I think especially with their starting unit that have played a lot of minutes, and I think that's important in a league that, well, not just in a league, but in a landscape of college basketball that's always, you know, churning over every year. It seems like, in terms of just roster turnover and all that. So I think there's value in that too. So to me, those are some of the things that could separate this A&M team, from everyone else. And obviously, I'll get more into the defensive statistics too that will probably give the Aggies a chance to win a lot of games.
Well, just at the 1 and 2, there's a whole lot coming back here. I mean, these guys aren't necessarily flashy guys. They're going to be first or second team All SEC guys, but I didn't realize Tyrese Radford was as good as he was a year ago. You look at the numbers, he averaged almost 11 and 6 a game, shot 49% from the field, 40% from three. I mean, that's excellent shooting. Was just so from the line, 67%. But you've got Obaseki, who kind of came on late for them. He was a top 35 national recruit. I think he's going to be a big part of their success. I think the people who are picking A&M to really take off probably put a lot of stock into that. You've got Andre Gordon, who's been pretty steady, almost a 2 assist to turnover ratio, 42% from field, 38% from three. Not a guy that'll take a lot of shots, but he doesn't make mistakes. And I'm leaving somebody out. Andre Gordon. No, I just talked about Andre Gordon. But anyway, they've got 4 or 5 guards. And then if you get to the wings, they've got Dennis. They've got Anderson Garcia. They've got Eric Pratt, the JUCO transfer, who put up some pretty big numbers a year ago, was a volume scorer for sure. They've got a lot of pieces here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it all starts with Radford for me, because again, he is someone that started as many games as he did. I think he's clearly, I mean, he's someone who scored last year, right? I mean, he averaged, I think, almost 11 points a game, something like that. But so I don't think you really classify him as a potential breakout scorer because he's already proven he can score. But if you're talking about the guy who's going to take that number up to, being able to replace some of the stuff that Quentin Jackson did, I think he's clearly the candidate, in my opinion, to do that. But I also don't think you can undersell, kind of the potential, the breakout possibility of Manny Obaseki, who, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we've talked about it before. Like they talk about him a lot, and like they know that this guy, I think, has the pieces to put it all together. And I think it's just being more efficient. You talk about, we talk about again the returning experience. I think he and Taylor, but they both started the last 13 games of the season last year. Obaseki scored consistently, I think, kind of during that NIT run. So I think those are the things that are going to be the key. If they're going to look more like the team that had the 8-game winning streak versus the 8-game losing streak, or the team that finished the season as hot as they did, I think it's that. It's getting a little bit more out of Radford, which you've already gotten a lot. He hit threes last year. He made 47 3-pointers, shot 40.2% from the perimeter. Obaseki, like we said, I think he's that guy that if you're making an all kind of sleeper breakout player type team in the SEC, he's probably on that list, right? I don't think there's any
Yeah.
question about that, because not only just by necessity, but by, I think, skill and, just seeing that the tools are there. It's just, now he steps into a much bigger role, and I think it's going to be kind of fun to see, what he does with that. So I think that's a big part of this. You look at it that way and feel like their backcourt is, I just think their backcourt, sets up pretty nicely in terms of having these guys who have been there. They've already played in the system. They know what's expected of them, not just on offense, but certainly on the defensive side of the floor. and then adding a defensive, stalwart, a guy like Dennis to come in who can also score. Let's not forget that too. Like he's a guy who's still going to score some points. I think he's the guy. I hate labeling guys as glue guys because I feel like that just undersells, some of their individual, attributes. But I feel like he's the guy that's going to hold everything together in terms of just being able to do so many different things for them and just contribute in a lot of different areas. So yeah, I mean, this is a very intriguing group from that perspective. In that, I think you've got proven guys that have been good in their roles. Now it's just everyone elevates their role another notch, and if you expect them to do that, and Gordon's another one too. I think Gordon's kind of like you know, another guy that I think will do a lot of things for them. As a senior, and I feel like he can play anywhere he needs to on the perimeter. Another guy who can shoot and he as well. I mean, just like a Dennis, I think he's an elite defender. So I mean, you think about just kind of that as a starting point. I can see why people are high on A&M just when you start with that group right there. So
Yeah, the guy I left out was Hayden Hefner, who played a lot of minutes for them. It felt like late in the season in conference play and could hit
and
some
he can
big
shoot
shots for
too.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Obaseki, to your point, he wasn't really much of a factor. I was just digging on Ken Palm as you were speaking there. He played at least 20 minutes in the Aggies' last 6 games. Like, if you look at midseason, from about the 15th of January until the 8th of February, he didn't play double-digit minutes in any game. And from that Auburn game on, which was the last game in that losing streak, he started to play more. And then really, actually, the first game of the winning streak coincided with him playing 19 minutes against Georgia. And then every game from there on was double figure minutes. So if you're looking and say, well, he only played 13 minutes a game last year, that certainly changed as the season went on. Okay, they've got some interesting transfers too. Anderson Garcia, who played about 15 minutes a game at Mississippi State, he moves over to College Station. You've got Julius Marble II, who transferred in from Michigan State, 6'9" player. Ethan Henderson also returns. He's 6'8". I don't know that Eric Pratt's going to be a big difference maker for them, but he did score 18 points a game in 23 minutes in JUCO, so that might be one to watch. If you need a volume score, it looks like he might be your guy. And then we'll get to Coleman in a minute, but I kind of wanted to talk about the other bigs and wings that didn't include Coleman, because Coleman is sort of a separate category. But again, common theme, a lot of parts there.
A lot of parts. I think it's just, I think it's what do you get out of those parts? And I think that's the question, right? Because you've got some transfers coming in, guys who were at SEC schools, right? Whether it's on the guard position, you're talking about a Robinson. We talked about a Garcia, who was at Mississippi State, and Henderson was there last year. I think he played in every game. He didn't play a ton, but he was at least there, and another defender I think that will help him. I think, yeah, maybe that was the best way. They got a lot of parts. It's just I think that I don't. I think it's hard to predict how those parts come together in terms of the rotation, right? Because I think you've got, to me, this is one of those teams where, like, I think you've got a pretty clear top six. I think they're 1 through 6. I mean, I think it's Taylor, Obaseki, Dennis, Radford, Coleman, Gordon. To me, that feels like a pretty clear top six. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, injuries and all that can happen, but if you're just based on what we know, that's a strong 6, I think, to be able to kind of lead on off the bat. But I think the difference now is, where do you get everywhere else? And I think that's where adding these different guys to the mix, a Marble as well, coming from Michigan State, gives them size. It's the same with several. I mean, Garcia, Henderson, Marble, they're all 6'7", or taller. So it gives them some size there to add to the mix. A 7-foot Javante Brown. We talked about Pratt. I think he's a good playmaker, but this is where we say this about every team, but like this is where you start to say, okay, we can say this about everybody in that, there's going to be a couple of these guys that play, and quite honestly, there's going to be a couple of these guys that don't play, and it's just trying to figure out who that's going to be. I think it's maybe a little bit harder to figure out on this team because, what the expectations are for a Buzz Williams team, And I think it's just, everybody understanding that and getting acclimated to the way that Buzz Williams wants his teams to play. I'm curious to see of this group, who maybe becomes the standout of this group. Is it a Garcia? Is it a Marble who shows some of that? I don't know, but I think there are at least some pieces that you can work with here.
Well, and then there's Henry Coleman III, who transferred from Duke, and he wasn't a McDonald's All-American Duke guy, I don't think. But I mean, if you're good enough to get a scholarship at Duke, that says a lot. He came in, averaged 11 and 6 right away. Not a huge enforcer down low. Averaged about a half block a game. Does get some steals, but shot 56% from the field, 67% from the line, and just was so solid for them.
Yeah, and he's, to me, he's the key here, right? Because in the front court, beyond that, you've got some questions. I think that's fair to say. In terms of just the production you're going to get at that true, sort of 5-man type position, which, he's kind of someone that, can pretty much do whatever he wants in the front court. But I think that's where, if you're looking at some things with this team, I think, Chris, we would agree that the backcourt depth is better than the front court depth. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a
But
lot of.
but the front court depth's not bad either.
No,
But
it's
yes.
not, but I think there's a little bit of a difference there, though, in terms of just
Yeah.
the way it's structured. Because again, and that's where, like, a Dexter Dennis who can play a guard or forward position, those kind of things. I think sometimes we get too far into the backcourt front court discussion when we know how it works in this era of college basketball, where it's just like,
It's what 5 can you put on the floor?
it's
Yeah.
right.
And
It
that
doesn't.
changes from minute to minute.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to look at it. I think it's sometimes splitting it is hard to do. But I think he's still the key to their season to me, because they don't have another guy. Maybe that's the best way to put it. They don't have another guy on the roster that has the makeup of his skill set, and just the obviously bringing the size and the efficiency. I mean, what, shot 56% from the floor last season, so pretty efficient in terms of him being able to, had a strong finish and all those things. I mean, he'll be their leader, I think, offensively and defensively. Like, he's the guy that is going to kind of anchor what you want to do on both sides of the floor, and I think that's an important part of that situation. So I think, but again, that becomes the issue, right? Is Henry Coleman like the true center? I know that's another thing where, like, if you slide someone else into that mix, whether that's I don't know, right, banking on a Marble or someone like that to, kind of.
It's not the tallest team. I mean, their
No.
option there would be Javonte Brown, if he develops into something.
Yeah,
7 foot
yeah.
253, but
I don't know if that's the thing, is like, I don't know if he's starting right away, though. I think the best option is probably, I mean, to me, it's like Marble is probably the guy that I feel like can probably play in a variety of roles, if in that traditional front court. So I feel like, depending on what kind of roster they want to put out there, because look, we said it a minute ago, I think this is important to remember, right? Let's say you start Taylor, Obaseki, Radford, and Dennis. Okay. That's 4 guys that are 6'5" or smaller, which I'm not saying you
yeah.
can't win. We've seen teams do that before, but that again is where, like, I do think you compare this team size wise to other teams in the SEC. I think we could say it's probably pretty fair to believe that this is probably going to be one of the smaller teams, just from a height
Yes.
standpoint. I mean, I think that's what we're going on. So I think that's something to think about for sure. But you know what, Chris, it was kind of the same last year, though. I mean that
Yeah.
it was the
They
same
played a
setup.
lot of guys every
Yeah,
night, Blake. I mean, I'm gonna pull up the rosters or from the boxes from NIT, but I mean, that
here you
that was
go.
a team that it felt like they went 11 to 12 a lot of nights.
Ken Palm, average height, they were 296 nationally. So a team that, in terms of just their height,
Yeah.
were in the bottom group in the country. So I think that's something to consider too. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
Let me look up the Xavier game and just see how many guys they played. They played 10 guys. Some of whom are gone. Cash is gone. Hassan Diarra's gone. And Quentin Jackson's gone. So they've got, what, 7 of the 10 back who played, including Ethan Henderson, who we haven't really talked about. And if I go back a game before that, I mean, I think they had some nights where they played more than that.
yeah,
Yeah, they did. I'm looking at the Washington State game they played. 13 guys, and that also includes 2 walk-ons who played 1 minute, but even Javonte Brown got into that game. So that's kinda how Buzz Williams rolls.
I think too, like I think a Solomon Washington's interesting to watch. Because I know he's a freshman, but like he does have some good size to him. And so we haven't talked about him a lot, but I think at a forward position at 6'7", I think that's someone too that maybe, you could see. Because I mean, think about that though, right? Like think about Buzz Williams and some of these freshmen. Think about guys we're talking about and how confident he's been to put some of these guys as freshmen, like a Taylor and Obaseki. Um, I think that's something about Buzz too, where like he's not hesitant, he's not afraid sometimes to throw these guys in the mix and just kind of watch them develop, in front of his eyes. And I think that's something with maybe some of these young guys that you don't expect necessarily. A Washington, someone like that, perhaps. So those are always ones to keep in mind. But I mean, man, there's this team is so interesting because, like I said, I think we obviously have not gone into every player in depth, but and I know we haven't talked about a KK Robinson or a Garcia, as much, but like these are guys that I think skill wise, because they are coming from SEC schools, right? They have that skill set there to develop into premier rotation
Yeah.
guys, whether that's a starter, whether that's, a guy off the bench that's playing 20 minutes a game. So I don't think we can leave that out. But I think it goes back to your initial point is that there's so many guys on this roster that I don't even know like how to even say this, but like this feels like one of the bigger rosters in the SEC. And I know like we know from like a number
Mm.
standpoint, it's the same, but like when you look at the available options, I feel like Buzz may have as many as anybody, just
Yeah.
given all these guys that we've talked about. So to me, it's just figuring out how does it all unfold from there. But the one thing, and before we wrap up, I don't want to forget this. Um, this is going to be another great defensive team. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that that you've come to expect with Buzz's teams. In the Buzz Williams era at Texas A&M, they finished in the top 30 in turnover percentage every single season. So this is a team that, may not look polished offensively without a Quentin Jackson right off the bat, but they're going to be able to use that defense to force turnovers, get some easy baskets. And I think that's once again going to be a big key for this team to have success in the SEC is to do defense to offense, turn that into the other. And I think that will be a big part of their potential success this season.
Yeah, I'm doing a quick check on this. Again, they had 11 guys who played double-digit minutes last year at a college somewhere. I think that's the best in the SEC. I'm taking a quick look. Ole Miss had 9. Missouri had what, 9 or 10? 9. Mississippi State had 9. LSU had 8. Georgia, probably the most comparable. Georgia had 10. So, yeah, I mean, and that's a random benchmark. Florida also had 10. So 10 minutes a game is kind of a random benchmark. But to your point, like if you want to compare them to other SEC rosters, just in terms of 1 to 13, which I know you don't play 13 scholarship guys most nights, but where that comes in handy is when you get a couple hurt, or God help you if it's 3 or more. That we have seen that happen, and I think they've got some nice fallback options potentially if the roster gets decimated in that kind of way.
I think that's a good way to put it. Doesn't feel like there's a huge drop off if you go from one of the initial and again, this is not taking away anything from the potential starting group we talked about, but like you do feel like there's skills you can plug in on the bench in with multiple guys here. And I think that's something that could play to their strength. You know, knowing again there's a lot of there's a lot of defense here, man. I mean, this is going to be if you enjoy defense, I look at this team and I feel like they are going to be a defensive team that will be hard to deal with at times, just given that you are adding a Dennis to the mix. Obviously, you've got someone in Coleman who I think can certainly help them on the defensive side. Um, you got a lot of guys on the bench. That's a good way to. How about this? There are going to be guys off the bench that are going to earn more minutes than you think, solely based on their defensive skill. And I think that will be something that will really play a factor in kind of what this rotation shapes up to be.
Well, and when I said those 11 guys that played double-digit minutes last year somewhere, that didn't include Javonte Brown, who played 7, and it didn't include KK Robinson, who I believe was a scholarship player at Arkansas, who played 5 minutes a game there last year. So even in addition to that 11, you got a couple more guys, plus you got the freshmen Washington and Williams. So, yeah, I guess we've kind of hammered that point home by now. But here's the interesting angle to me. I was hearing or reading Joe Lunardi the other day speak about A&M, and he felt A&M wasn't an egregious snub. I think he had him his last team in, and of course A&M didn't get into the tournament, as everybody knows. I think that he undersold A&M. He does bracketology. He knows more about it than I did. But when I did my own, I had A&M safely in the field by 5 or 6 spots based on that last minute up to date resume. And you look at some of the teams that they beat Alabama, which was a tournament team down the stretch of the regular season, knocked Florida off the bubble, beat Auburn, beat Arkansas, and then played with Tennessee for a bit before it didn't, I guess. I've forgotten how that one went. Tennessee won that 165-50. And you go down the schedule last year, the problem that they had, and Lunardi pointed this out, and he's right, was the out-of-conference schedule. Just didn't do anything in that portion, lost to Wisconsin TCU. You look at the schedule this year, Blake, not an incredibly strong one. I mean, an away game with Memphis. Other than that, Murray State is not expected to be great, according to Ken Palm, 129. But Murray State has jumped up and had some dominant seasons before. You hope what happens to A&M a year ago does not happen to A&M again, where that out-of-conference schedule cost the Aggies on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, look, you still don't get the benefit of playing the SEC Big 12 Challenge, so you don't get a potential big win opportunity there yet. For A&M, I assume they'll be back in it next year, would be my guess, based on how the rotation works. But yeah, I mean, there's still, not a ton. Murray State, obviously, Matt McMahon's at LSU now, and some of their players are with him, so I don't know exactly what that looks like in year one for a returning coach and Steve Prom there. So yeah, I mean, the questions, obviously the Memphis game, I think will be the standout one if you're just looking at it on paper. But yeah, so I think still a team that'll have to make the most of their non-conference portion here to be able to, yeah, I mean, still be in that conversation. So it will be interesting to see how they manage the schedule.
Before we wrap it up, quick word from our sponsor. Got some big games coming up this week to add some extra excitement. We at Southeastern 14 are making predictions in the Stakes app. We want to see if you guys agree or disagree with our picks. Go to playwithstakes.com. That's STAKES /14. Sign up for Stakes. Place your predictions on our questions. Use the invite code Southeastern14 when you sign up. You'll get a double welcome bonus. Help out our presenting sponsor. Help us out. Have some fun. It costs you nothing. It's not a betting app. It's just a predictions app. Free to join, free to play, and you can win stuff. What's not to like about that? Okay, Blake, we will be doing our power rankings soon. A little bit of a spoiler alert. I don't think we've quite got A&M in that top group of the league, but I think this team will be pretty good and ought to be in the NCAA tournament come March.
Hit that subscribe button and you will find out where we have them. Yes, we will have all of our rankings up and everything else. But yeah, I mean, that, the upside's there to make the tournament. I don't think there's any question about that. It's just, where do they fall compared to, the other teams that are ahead of them? I think that'll be an interesting discussion. But if you're talking about experience, returning experience, defensive ability, and a potential breakout offensive team, I think that's the part we want to see with them, is a lot of these guys expand their offensive roles and do that efficiently. That could be the thing that kind of separates whether A&M is a tournament team or perhaps kind of fall in the middle of the SEC somewhere.
Okay, he's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching our preview of A&M. The way to get previews of all the SEC teams, and we are going to preview every SEC team for the coming basketball season, is hit that subscribe button. We're doing a ton of football content. We do live streams Wednesday night. Anyway, Make sure you don't miss it by hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon at Southeastern 14.